Minister, of course, nobody who receives this credit before Christmas or after Christmas will be sorry to receive it. But as the ESRI have pointed out, the net effect of your budget is that some of the least well-off, most vulnerable households are actually going to be marginally less well-off when you look at your budget in the round, which is pretty shameful, with astonishing, unprecedented budget surpluses, and of course, the Apple billions. So that's quite a feat, that even the ESRI, hardly a radical or left-wing think tank, is saying you had the chance to eliminate poverty, you didn't take it, and some of those who are most vulnerable will actually end up being worse off. So this is first of all an epic fail with those resources available to the government, and it does beg the question, if with a absolutely unprecedented budget surplus, with billions and billions available to the state to the point that they have to put some of it away in a piggy bank, billions of it away in a piggy bank. If you can't eliminate poverty now, when are you going to eliminate poverty? And the answer is, if you can't eliminate it now, you're never going to eliminate it. Because there will always be other excuses when times become more financially constrained or the economy hits bumps and so on. So it is, to my mind, shameful that the government is, instead of eliminating poverty and setting out as an objective, with all those resources available to you, the objective of eliminating poverty, including energy poverty, completely in this budget, that we get a couple of once-off payments that act as sticking plasters on a situation where 1/3 of the people in this country, 1/3 of households in this country, are at risk of energy poverty or actually suffering from energy poverty. And of course, the big problem is the fact that in this country, because of the profiteering of energy companies, we are paying twice the price of electricity across the rest of Europe on average, and we are paying 50% more for gas. So it's profiteering is the problem. And most of the money, as welcome as it will be for those who receive it, who are struggling to pay their bills, that money is then just going to go into the pockets of profiteering energy companies, instead of addressing the root problem, which is the profiteering in the first place. And that's what we believe you should do. Whatever about, and there are other measures necessary in order to eliminate poverty and raise people out of poverty. So, for example, in our alternative budget, we said that the fuel allowance should be increased by 20%, that many of those who are dependent on social welfare payments now at the moment who don't get the fuel allowance, because you have to be on it a certain amount of time. If you're on a benefit payment, for example, you don't get it at all. That's wrong, and people should get that fuel allowance. They should get an increased fuel allowance, and more generally, social welfare and pension rates should be raised to the level that takes everybody out of the poverty trap. That's what we proposed in our budget. But on the specific area of energy, as you know, we believe we should control the price of energy to prevent profiteering. And we brought a bill forward in 2024 precisely to that end, which, needless to say, your government doesn't support. The energy companies have enjoyed an absolute bonanza over the last number of years. They have benefited spectacularly from the cost of living crisis that has crucified ordinary working people and seen their profits go through the roof. It's true, ESB profits slightly down on the astronomical levels that they were enjoying in the previous years, but they're still astronomical profits. Last year, €446 million in profits, and similar increases for all the energy providers over recent years. So the companies doing well out of a cost of living crisis that is driving about 1/3 of our population into energy poverty. And you refuse to do anything about it. In fact, what you do is provide a subsidy for them via the pockets of those affected by energy poverty, rather than address the profiteering itself. So that, in a word, is what we think. The once-off payments you're giving people will undoubtedly be, better than nothing at all, given the bills that the inflated bills that they will have to face over the winter months, but they do not address the underlying problem. And when you ask, why is it that energy prices are higher in this country than anywhere else, the answer to that question is the deregulation of the energy sector in this country. As I mentioned, we are now paying twice as much for electricity as the EU average, 50% more on gas, but before we removed the not-for-profit mandate of the ESB and deregulated the sector, we had the lowest, or among the lowest, I think the actual lowest, electricity and energy costs in the rest of Europe. So the promise of deregulation, competition, privatisation, delivering lower cost electricity and energy turned out to be a complete lie. The opposite happened. Since deregulation, since privatisation, since the removal of the not-for-profit mandate of the ESB, the cost of electricity and energy in this country has risen and risen and risen steadily, and then reached stratospheric levels during the height of the cost of living crisis over the last few years, and imposed terrible hardship on some of the poorest, least well-off and most vulnerable people in this country. So we should reverse that. We should reverse that. We should take the energy sector back under full public control. We should run it as it was done in the past, on a not-for-profit basis, because providing people with energy, the means to heat their homes and so on, shouldn't be a privilege, shouldn't be a situation where people are afraid to turn on the heating, afraid to use too much hot water in case the bills get out of hand. And that's the reality of this situation. That's the human reality. And anybody who walks around knocking on doors over the next number of weeks, or whenever it is the election is called, you know, Ossian, and I know, we will meet lots and lots of particularly older, vulnerable people who will be afraid to have showers, to turn on the heating when they need it, and will be shivering in the cold because of the fear that the energy bills that they get will be unpayable, even with these two credits. So that is the issue we need to address. We shouldn't have vulnerable and older people living in fear of just keeping their houses warm or having hot water, and we could do that if we use the money and resources available for us to take the energy sector back fully under public ownership and run it for a not-for-profit basis. And my God, more than ever, we have the resources that would allow us to do that.